Donald Trump and Republican lawmakers may be publicly backing away from unpopular abortion politics, but conservative Christian activists are playing the long game. The New York Times reports battalions of anti-abortion groups across the country are planting seeds for their ultimate goal of ending both abortion and the use of IVF. And some of those seeds are easier to spot than others. Quote, as they see it, their challenge spans generations, not simply a single political cycle. And their approach, including controlling regulatory language, state party platforms, and the definition of when life begins, reflects an incremental strategy similar to the one activists used for decades to eventually overturn Roe v. Wade. Joining us now, New York Times journalist covering faith and politics, Elizabeth Dias. Elizabeth, it's good to have you. Explain what you're seeing.
Well, so many people were, of course, surprised when Roe was overturned. And part of that is because the seeds that conservative Christians were planting for so many years about their strategy to do that were hard to spot, especially at the very early stages, right? That was a 40, 50-year fight to eventually overturn Roe, and it started with small things. So now, even though we're watching their biggest ally, former President Donald Trump, back away from them, I mean, he knows how completely unpopular restrictions on IVF especially is. But even as they're losing that ally, they're still in small ways in key areas thinking about this long game and what kind of regulations, restrictions might they want to see in, say, 10, 20 years down the line. So they're...
No, I'm sorry. What might they be doing now with if Donald Trump's elected president? What do they think they can do if they can't get to the ultimate goal in this single political cycle, as they argue? What sort of seeds will they plant with a Donald Trump presidency?
Sure. Well, I've been hearing a lot about regulations that they want to pass, things like reporting requirements at the Department of Health and Human Services for various components of the IVF procedure. I've been hearing talk of regulations even at like the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies, these things that can start in just sort of bureaucratic ways that people might not pay attention to rule number whatever that's coming from a certain department. But certainly they know that they can staff the administration with allies like they were able to do the first administration of his, and could really put them in place when they're thinking about what kinds of change they would want to see after his term. And even if he doesn't win, right, they're thinking about mobilizing evangelicals, for example, to support restrictions on IVF, which they haven't done before. We saw that for the first time this summer at the Southern Baptist Convention, for example.
Yeah, and they could potentially use that, as you write, to convince politicians that there are enough people out there that they should work on an agenda that takes banning IVF into account. If Donald Trump gets elected, there is this talk that he could potentially have 2 Supreme Court justices to nominate, that you could see Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito step down and allow him to nominate somebody or 2 people that are much younger and will hold those roles for much longer. Do these activists have judges in mind? Do they have people that they would want to see nominated to the Supreme Court?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the most effective things that they were able to do the first time around in 2016 during Donald Trump's campaign was to put in place lists of judges that they would want to see. And now, that was such a surprise back then that he actually won, but they're able to make these lists now and plan ahead so they can be ready to go.
Elizabeth Dias, thank you very much, and thank you for bringing us your reporting. I do appreciate it. We all appreciate it.